Good morning, everybody. So, bright and early today. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 14, the Red Sea crossing. So, I'm excited. Let us take a look here. Gonna give this earlier time a try. We'll see if we like it or not, right? So, Exodus chapter 14, it begins by saying, Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, so that they turn and camp before Pi Hitheroth, Hahiroth, there we go, Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are bewildered by the sea, the wilderness has closed them in. So I pulled out my atlas yesterday, but many of you probably can just imagine the Mount Sinai, right? So for you guys, I think it goes this way. You got Egypt over here, you have Mount Sinai, and you have Saudi Arabia, and you have two gulfs going up around the sides of Mount Sinai, or not Mount Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula. And if you look on Google Maps, even modern day, there's a nice trail that leads down along the western coast of the Sinai Peninsula. And as you round the point of the Sinai Peninsula, you can't really keep going around. I mean, not with massive, massive amounts of people, because the mountains come right up to the coastline. And so this is the idea of them being trapped by all the people. Verse 4 says, Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and all over his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And so they did so. Now it was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants were turned against his people. And they said, Why have we done this? Why have we let Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. He took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with the captains over every one of them. Now Josephus, in his book Antiquities, he mentions there being 50,000 horsemen and 200,000 footmen. So quite an army, that's for sure. And 60 tanks, being those chariots coming along as well, that's very likely. Verse 8 says, And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses, the chariots of Pharaoh, and they came to where they were headed. So Pharaoh draws near, the children drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes. Behold, the Egyptians marched after them, so they were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, you have taken us to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us, bring us out of Egypt? Is it not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better to serve the Egyptians, that we should die in the wilderness. So as you can see, the people are complaining again. And Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So that's it. God's saying, hey, God will fight for you. Just watch your mouth. Quit running your mouth. And the Lord said to Moses, Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I'll indeed harden the hearts of the Egyptians. They shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the angel of God, here we have the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians, the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. And so the children of Israel went in the midst of the sea on dry ground. The waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them in the midst of the sea, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and horsemen. And it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire in the cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians. He took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea and the waters, and come back up, that it comes back upon the Egyptians and on their chariots and their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth. So the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them, so that not so much as one of them remained. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hands of the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. So there we go. We just read the whole thing. It's a straightforward story. And that's the sad thing. How could such a straightforward story get taken so out of context and be so confused by scholars? What you'll find is that there are slews of people who try and explain this away as some other event, as some other thing, something other than a miracle. My notes are on the first page. And so what's interesting is that the word here for the Red Sea, it's the Suf Sea. And that word Suf in Hebrew can actually have multiple meanings, one of which is red, the Red Sea. Also, though, it can mean reeds. It's funny how red and reed are similar in English, but no reason for the Hebrew there. And so some have taken this to say, well, it wasn't the Red Sea, it was a reed sea, like a marsh, like a not too deep, swampy marsh. And, the Israelites just crossed through the marsh. God provided a way, where they could walk through the marsh. But you see how much that doesn't make it any easier. Because now you got to ask yourself, how did the army of Pharaoh drown in this little reed marsh that people talk about? When you read what the scripture says, it speaks plainly. It says the waters were to the left and to the right as walls to them. And what's worth noting is that in the book of Acts and Hebrews, where they talk about this event, Acts 7:36, Hebrews 11:29, well, the Greek words there in the New Testament is red. And in the Greek, red means red, the Red Sea. Also worth noting, when they translated the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, the rabbis used the word red, not reed. Those rabbis weren't confused about what sea was being talked about. It is worth noting, I think this is, 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 26. It says that King Solomon had his navy stationed in Elat on the north side of the Red Sea. It's also worth noting, too, where did the Red Sea crossing take place? Well, it seems as if biblically the Red Sea is not the Western Gulf from the modern-day Sinai Peninsula, but it's the Eastern Gulf, the Gulf of Aqaba. So that shows, again, that they came down into the Sinai Peninsula, crossed over into Arabia. Galatians chapter 4 tells us that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, which again, that speaks more of modern-day Saudi Arabia, more so than the Sinai Peninsula. Why do we call the Sinai Peninsula then? Well, it's because of a nice lady named Catherine, who had a very influential son by the name of Constantine. She went down and she established, as Christianity became the worldwide accepted religion of the Roman Empire, this must be where they went. And so there's a St. Catherine's Church there at Sinai, and they recognize it as the location of Mount Sinai. And she just, this is, so anyway, so that's why we call Sinai Peninsula the Sinai Peninsula, is because of Catherine, who came down and established where she thought it all took place. She wasn't an archaeologist or anything. She just went around, and you'll find that there's quite a few Catholic religious sites in Israel as well, because she went down and she established this is where this happened, this is where that happened. And a lot of churches were built in those locations, and still today, people say, well, this is where this happened. And some of the sites are really off. You'll find like the Church of the Multiplicity on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, where Catherine decided that, well, this must be where he did the loaves and the fish. But biblically, it's wrong, because they're on the whole opposite side of the lake when that event took place. So things like that are worth noting. Other good cross references, right? If you look at Psalm 106, Psalm 106 speaks about this event. Verses 9 to 11. And it says, the waters covered their enemies. There was not, back up. He rebuked the Red Sea also, and it dried up. He led them through the depths as though through the wilderness. He saved them from the hand of him who hated him and redeemed them from the hand of their enemy. The waters covered their enemies. There was not one of them left. So again, it speaks of the water drying. It speaks of there not being one of them left. Isaiah 51:10, I believe it refers to them going through the great deep. 51:10, are you not the one who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? So where am I getting at? Well, the main thing is this, is that it's a story we're all familiar with. And maybe if you've been brought up in the right circles, you've never heard people question this and try and say it's a reed sea or, this and that. But that stuff's prevalent today. It's all around. I always joke, anything about the Bible on the History Channel is garbage. Absolute and utter garbage. That's all I've ever seen. I'm going to just stick with that. It's garbage. And a lot of times it's because they are always trying to find ways to take the miracles out of the Bible. They don't want the Bible to be miraculous. So they come up with these rational, logical, but earthly explanations for miraculous events. The problem is the Bible is a book of miracles. And when you start taking the miracles out, you're changing the Word of God. And so maybe you're not going to have a big contention with people over the Red Sea. But at some point, people are going to argue with you, well, does the Bible really say that? Or does it mean this? Or does it mean that? And so whether it's the doctrine of the resurrection, whether it's the controversial topic of is homosexuality sin, these are things the Bible speaks really plainly on, and yet people try and twist the Bible to make it say things it doesn't say. And so we just looked at a few cross references today in the Bible, because the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. And we just went and looked to see, again, how do these things show that the plain reading is the correct reading? And so we don't need to go find some other reading and other understanding. Just take it as it is. They crossed the sea and God split it open. He made it like walls on their left and on their right, and they walked through as if on dry ground. So that was part of that miracle there, is they didn't walk across on muddy ground. They walked across on dry ground. I just take that to mean dry ground. So take the Bible at face value, not just the miracles, but the promises. Take the promises at face value, that you don't have to worry. You don't need to be anxious for anything, but by prayer and supplication, God can give you the peace that surpasses understanding. Take the warnings at face value, that we must all stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account of the things done in the body, whether they're good or the bad, right? Take it all at face value. Just take it and believe it and apply it, and much good will come from it. But if we begin to kind of, and you twist it and you turn it and you make it a little more palatable and you make it, you're going to lose all the power that God has intended to convey and impart through his word to you. So take God at his word and you'll do well. All right. Well, day one of trying the earlier morning live stream is in the bag. Hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll do the same time tomorrow. We'll just try this for a few days and we'll see where we go from there. So God bless you guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys around.